This project particularly was prompted by an article that I had read that was kind of speaking on China-Africa relationships set in mainly in Nairobi. But it was like a very kind of macro socioeconomic, and I was more curious about like, why are some of the Chinese people, why did they pick Kenya? And also on the flip side, it's just like, okay, well, if you are living in Nairobi and perhaps like, have always grown up there, and all of a sudden you decide to study Chinese, or you decide to try to engage in business with China, like what does that look like?
It seems like there's a shock for you because you realize the Chinese image has been perceived in a negative way. An example in the documentary, there's a parts of showing how Chinese real estate developers went into Kenya market without proper research and failed to cater local needs. So, in your opinion, what does this example manifest when the Chinese trying to do business in Africa? What's missing? What's the problem in this communication process?
Yeah, I think the apartment example, that's at a very basic level, but so telling of what that cultural mismatch could be. So I think it's like, if someone who grew up in Kenya takes a tour in that apartment, they can just really feel that, it's not, the kitchen is not adjusted to their cooking habits, like, their lounge or their living room is not kind of like designed to meet the needs of how people live there. But I think that this also happens everywhere around the world because homeowners also get to decide for themselves which homes they are going to buy. And obviously, that one came with a heavy price tag. So I feel like in that example, perhaps if it doesn't sell well, the real estate developer will learn from that and perhaps do an audit or just ask advice or do some consultancy on how they can do better next time.
I want to talk about the balance of information. From some of the stories we've heard or we've seen from media outlets, Confucius Institute has been criticized and perceived in the negative way that Chinese is trying to go in to dominate other culture. But in your documentary, there's actually the side of some teachers at the institute trying to learn about each other, trying to create opportunities for both sides to present themselves. When you present those information, like you said yourself, it's like snowballing and every single day you access new information, every single day there's a new story. How do you balance this out, try to present in a unbiased way in your documentary?
It was really not about my opinion. And I really wanted to just speak to people and have them also speak for themselves. So I think an example of the Confucius Institute, I didn't decide to interview anyone who was like at a really high level, kind of speaking about the intention of the Confucius Institute, but instead I tried to I try to follow some of the teachers. I try to follow some of the students. I went to some of their events and dance rehearsals. And at least from that part, from what I could tell, was that the people that I spoke to chose to be there. For example, the student Ezra, who I spoke to, he had a very clear goal. He was actually already doing business, import export, with China. And he was saying, like, if I learn Chinese, it will benefit me from a linguistic perspective, but also perhaps like kind of understanding like the cultural side of business, of doing business a little bit better. And the other interesting example, I found the dance teacher. She knows Chinese dance, she knows classical dance very well. But as she was spending more time there, she was learning about like, such a rich selection of kind of African dance, but also body movements. And then she started creating these choreographies that had a bit of a mashup. So after we launched the documentary, we put it on YouTube. Over time, it accumulated more and more views, but especially the comment section, I think, is super interesting because There was like mostly constructive dialogue about people talking about two things. One, sort of like the practicality of having Chinese investment or having like kind of tools of education. And then there's like another side of the conversation that was much more value driven and value based, that people are like, it's so hard to decouple education or investment from what has happened, historically, and the positions of China and Kenya. I felt like this is exactly what people need who have a stake in it, is to be able to see that kind of both parts and actually just almost like directly reach out to each other, whether it's in person or anonymous.